My name is David Daniel Boll, and these are the headlines for Saturday, the 28th of March, 2009. Nick Darcy escapes jail sentence. Notorious president disputes drug links. Hell's Angels join Bandidos to farewell Anthony Zervas. Defense formally denies spying on Fitzgibbon. Screaming bum-flashing lecturer jailed. Sydney tree loses shirt off its bark. Power company could switch off TV and air conditioning. In New South Wales, we call them the government. Italy's Fritzl held for rape and incest. Strike Force Raptor launched as backup bikies are called in. Financial crisis caused by people with blue eyes, says Brazilian president. DNA test proves 13-year-old Alfie's not a dad. And in comments from Andrew Bolt. Pakistan bleeding. Pakistan may soon make Iraq seem a picnic. Note the AFP spin, twice inserted in its report, that the Islamist challenge to secular rule is in fact no more than another protest against the US foreign policy. How much influence does China have on the Rudd team? And an update, opposition Treasury spokesman Joe Hockey attacks. I'm concerned about, the pattern of behavior at the moment. Kevin Rudd received free trips when he was in opposition from Chinese interests. Wayne Swan, the treasurer, received these trips. Tony Burke, the agriculture minister. Now we hear about the defense minister receiving free trips from China. At the same time, we learned today that the Australian government is borrowing around $500 million a week from the Chinese government. And then we discover that Kevin Rudd had a meeting with the Chinese propaganda minister and didn't tell the Australian media. What is going on? Reporter Lenore Taylor's verdict that Joe Hockey is dog whistling to xenophobics among us. What is really disturbing for me involved Lateline's reporting. Lateline's reporting was typically one-sided. Turnbull's picture was calm and assured as he called for the sacking of Fitzgibbon and gave valid, cogent reasons. The voiceover described it as desperate. Preceding that image was a sweating, spinning Rudd furtively licking his lips and looking for all the world out of his depths, saying he was disappointed but would do nothing. The voiceover assured us things were happening, but the infringement was minor. Then, in an interview with Alexander Downer, the interviewer interrupted him and demanded he address a false dichotomy suggesting Turnbull's leadership was in trouble. The masterful Downer calmly handled that lousy interviewer. The issue, as I say it, is that the ABC is so partisan that the threat of a failing government covering up international indiscretions goes unexamined. Jail Einfeld style. Porridge is for the poor. The former judge Marcus Einfeld requested a private psychologist and masseur during his first week in jail, and that his cell door be left open at night. Their new Australian home from Andrew Bolt. The head of Sydney's newest and most feared bikie gang last night revealed membership is growing rapidly, mainly young men of Middle Eastern heritage who don't all ride motorbikes. Earth Hour starts early. From Andrew Bolt, I'm guessing the gases saved will match those saved in Sydney on Earth Hour itself. A fault at a substation has cut power to about 50,000 homes and businesses in southern Sydney. Her lectures would be interesting. Southern Cross University thought Megumi Ogawa had just the talents to be an associate lecturer in its School of Law and Justice. Yesterday, she demonstrated some of her skills in a courtroom. A Japanese law lecturer who bared her bottom to a judge and had to be removed from her own trial for incessant screaming has been jailed for contempt. UN declares, don't criticize Muslims. The United Nations has confirmed it is now a threat to your rights and not a safeguard to them. Louise Adler, there seems on Q&A last night a great eagerness, especially from Louise Adler, the Melbourne University Press publisher, to condemn Israel for war crimes in Gaza on the basis of allegations which seemed at least questionable, as Andrew Bolt tried to point out. Did Carlin come clean on Q&A? On Q&A last night, I challenged Muslim convert and academic Susan Carland when she claimed Muslims were just being demonized as Italian and street immigrants had been before, and just for as little reason. Blaming whitey racism is fine as long as the Brazilian president directs it at whites. Standing next to British Prime Minister Gordon Brown at a news conference in Brasilia, Silva again pointed a finger saying the financial crisis was caused by white people with blue eyes, and that the world's poorest nation should not have to pay for a crisis they did not create. Hillary Clinton blames America for some of Mexican drug chaos by Bill O'Reilly. Speaking to the press in Mexico, Secretary Clinton said this: "It is a drug demand in the United States which drives the drugs north across our border. If there were not such a high level of demand, it wouldn't be so profitable and you wouldn't have these drug gangs fighting for territory because they make so much money selling drugs to Americans." And you know what? Mrs. Clinton is mostly correct. Without the American drug market, the cartels would be less powerful. However, Mexico would still be corrupt because that country has never been able to develop a vibrant middle class or build a solid economic base. And that's all on Mexico. We have nothing to do with that failure. But back to the drugs. The baby boomers are mostly responsible for the drug problem in the USA. The Woodstock generation thought it was cool to get stoned, and that has carried over and gotten even worse in our permissive society. The far left want to legalize drugs even though the policy has failed everywhere it's been tried. Go visit Holland and find out. The far left also wants to allow many drug criminals to evade prison. They consider selling heroin, cocaine, and meth a non-violent crime, even though those drugs enslave and kill. So there are very mixed messages on the drug front in America, and millions of folks buy and use illegal narcotics, a selfish act that helps killers. Secretary Clinton also mentioned gun smuggling from the USA to Mexico. There are about 9 guns for every 10 people in this country because of our tradition of self-reliance. The Second Amendment rightly gives Americans the right to defend themselves. Take it from me, the authorities cannot protect you from harm. Just look at what happened in New Orleans after Katrina. Anyone caught in that town without a weapon was in grave danger from roving criminals. Actually, Bill, even those with weapons were in grave danger too. And there is no question that thugs are using guns to do an enormous amount of damage. So here is the solution that Hillary Clinton should embrace. All gun crimes should be federal. Anyone committing a crime with a gun or smuggling guns faces a minimum of 20 years in prison. That will make the risk-reward on gun crimes very tough. The National Guard should finally be stationed on Mexican border in force to assist the Border Patrol. That would immediately make it far more difficult to smuggle drugs in and guns out. A national media campaign using President Obama as a spokesman should inform Americans that buying illegal drugs is self-destructive and un-American. Since President Obama has some drug experience, he is the right person to get this message across, especially to young people. As for Mexico, President Calderon is a brave man who is trying to defeat those vicious drug lords. The USA should stand with him. An outcry against U.S. budget heard around the globe. From Interview, this is a rush transcript from Hannity, March the 26th, 2009. This copy may not be in its final form and may be updated, and this is only a portion of it. Sean Hannity is the host. Mr. President, while you are answering questions about marijuana on the internet and your Treasury Secretary is busy devaluating the dollar, people are suffering both here and abroad. And that is our headline this Thursday night, number 66 of False Hope, Loose Change. The world is watching. They are watching as your cabinet can't get your policy straight. They're watching while members of your party dismember your own budget. They're watching as you continue to push for the greatest expansion of government that this nation has ever seen. And they're watching, Mr. President, and they don't necessarily like what they're seeing. Now, just ask our first guest tonight. He is a British member of the European Parliament who turned heads when he exorciated Prime Minister Gordon Brown and his economic agenda that is very similar to what is happening right here in our country. The truth, Prime Minister, is that you have run out of our money. The country as a whole is now in negative equity. Every British child is born owing around £20,000. Servicing the interest on that debt is going to cost more than educating the child. Now, once again, today, you tried to spread the blame around. You spoke about an international recession, international crisis. We are now running a deficit that touches 10% of GDP, an almost unbelievable figure. Now, it's not that you're not apologizing. Like everyone else, I've long accepted that you're pathologically incapable of accepting responsibility for these little things. It's that you're carrying on willfully worsening our situation, wantonly spending what little we have left. You know and we know, and you know that we know that it's nonsense. Everyone knows that Britain is worse off than any other country as we go into these hard times.